Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar from First Voice, sponsored by Virgin Media Business. Today we're going to look beyond analog telephone systems and consider how going digital with VoIP can benefit small businesses. Traditional analog telephone systems will soon be a thing of the past. Customers will migrate to new VoIP systems that will revolutionize how small businesses use their phones. In this webinar, we'll examine how small businesses can take advantage of the opportunities created by VoIP. We'll look at how VoIP can enable greater productivity, reduce costs, and improve levels of customer satisfaction. Before we begin, however, I'd like to briefly explain the format. During today's event, our first speaker will make a presentation and provide simultaneous commentary. Then we're going to run a few polls, and then we'll move on to a conversation where our speakers will look at the shift to user-friendly telephone systems. Then we'll wrap up by dealing with any additional questions that you may have sent in. Okay, we're really keen to address any questions or comments you have throughout the session, so please do submit them as we go. That way we can get to them straight away and answer them as soon as they appear. You can use the question box that's visible on your screens to send in questions. Simply type in your question and press send. You can do this at any time throughout the session. Right, we've got two great speakers for you today. Our first speaker is Tim Pratchett. Tim is Hosted Voice Senior Product Manager with Virgin Media Business. Tim will take us through some of the key aspects of digital transformation. Then after that, Tim will introduce our second speaker, and that is Jim Brand, and Jim is the CEO of Synovos Communications. Tim will then put a series of questions to Jim about the future direction of telephony in the digital age. Okay, we've got a lot to get through today, so the first thing we're going to do is get started with a couple of poll questions. And the first question should appear on your screens in just a moment, and the question is, how well informed do you feel about VoIP and its capabilities? How well informed do you feel about VoIP and its capabilities? And the answer options are, I don't know anything about it, I know a little, but I want to know more so I can make informed decisions. I already use VoIP. There's answers again. I don't know anything about it. I know a little, but want to know more so I can make informed decisions. Or I already use VoIP. Okay, you should have had long enough to vote now. And any second now, we should be able to see the results of that poll. Okay, that's it's quite a compelling result. Almost 75% of you say, I know a little about it, but I want more info so I can make informed decisions. Well, you've come to the right place. Okay, we're going to move on to our second poll quite quickly and get that out of the way before we turn to our speakers. And the second question, again, should appear on your screens. Just a moment. How useful do you feel VoIP would be to your business? How useful do you feel VoIP would be to your business? And the answer options are, I don't see clear benefits. It looks interesting, but I'd like to know more. We use it already and it's great. So that again is, how useful do you feel VoIP would be to your business? I don't see clear benefits. It looks interesting, I'd like to know more. We already use it and it's great. And we should be able to see the results of that. Well, again, overwhelming. It looks interesting. I'd like to know more. Compelling. 94% of you say that. I'm sure we'll return to those poll results during the course of the next 20 or so minutes, maybe a little bit longer as the conversation progresses. And then because there's things we're going to touch on there. Okay, but without any further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Tim. So over to you, Tim.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that, Oliver. So it's good to see that actually within the polls there are some people who know a little bit about VoIP and some people who want to know more. Hopefully over the next 15, 20 minutes as part of my presentation, I'll be able to give you that insight and be able to give you that informed, educated position to be able to take that VoIP conversation that next step further. So what I intend on doing is discussing with you around the VoiceoverIP, what it is, where it fits, and actually how it can help you as a business. Later on, I'll be having a conversation with Jim Rand, talking about how it has helped his business and how it's helped him drive his business forward, utilising VoIP in the best way possible. So in terms of the actual VoIP, how useful is it for your business? I think it's no doubt that we are in a digital age. Much of what we're doing is embracing this digital evolution. The way we work, the way we go on holiday, and the way that we communicate is being digitalized. Just this morning on the train, I noticed that the trainways are going to become more digitized. Everywhere, every aspect of life is becoming more digital. That's primarily because it makes things quicker, cheaper, and actually more efficient in the way that we deliver services and the way that we consume services. Into communication, we see that the likes of television and radio have already gone digital, with people and businesses reaping the benefits of more channels, more variance and availability of television and radio, as well as the ability to share more information in a quicker and more efficient manner. Yet telephony hasn't necessarily seen the same drivers. Though businesses see that voice communication is one of the most important components and most important channel of communication, it's not necessarily taken it to that digital step forward until now. We've seen mobility, we've seen people moving to mobile, but it's often perceived as a disparate approach to communication. It's not necessarily interlinked with the traditional landline telephony. And therefore, what I want to do is identify how we're bringing those two worlds together to make a digitalized communication platform. Voice is still important. And we know that if we want to get a message across, we often communicate via verbally. If we have an emergency, we ring up 999 and speak to some of the operators. If I want to get a message across to you guys, such as in this webinar, I'm using my voice and I'm communicating over a conference. But no matter how important it is, we also know that it is frustrating. We've all been in the scenario where we're doing a phone tag, where I'll call someone, they don't answer, they call me back, I don't answer. And just trying to get that association where we both actually answer the phone to have that conversation can get really frustrating. Similarly, if I ring up a restaurant and they don't answer, I may try it one more time. And if they don't answer again, I'll take my business elsewhere. That business has lost out there simply because they didn't have the means, the technology to embrace that communication method. So instead of actually taking the technology and driving it forward or utilizing the technology in the best way, we've actually built these etiquette to actually suit the legacy telephony services. So, for example, if I rang somebody and they didn't answer, I might ring their mobile to see if they answer that. And it's that hierarchy of communication that we've had to go through rather than just ringing one single number. Also, if I'm on the receiving end of a phone call, if someone's rang me once, I may ignore it. But if they ring me 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, I know it's serious. And we've built this etiquette whereby I go, okay, it's 2, 3 times, it must be serious. And I think my favorite of all is actually if and when people do get through to voicemail, they'll leave a voicemail and say, sorry, couldn't get through to you, so I've sent you an email. It just becomes a bit ludicrous, really, where we're actually trying to have a conversation with each other, yet we're taking these multiple channels, these multiple means, and actually taking this legacy technology and having to fit ourselves around that. How much time is wasted on the individual, but more importantly for a business, how much time and inefficient is that method so that you're having to adapt in order to just use legacy technology? As we move forward, more and more communication methods are embraced. So we talked about mobility, we've talked about landline, we've talked about email, but now more and more people utilize the likes of instant messenger. They talk about conferencing as we are here. There are all these components that seem so disparate that can actually be consolidated into one single simplified communication method to really embrace that next generation technology. Now, VoiceoverIP or VoIP has actually been around for 20 years now. It's been trudging around through businesses and the large businesses have been dabbling in this space. But it's really the small businesses that are taking this to the next level. The agility, the variance coming across from small businesses can embrace this new technology and really push its parameters to make sure that they get the best returns from it. And more importantly, their end customers are receiving the best service and the best communication methods to retrieve that. In consumer world, we're all quite comfortable with voice over IP. We utilize WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and many other social media means utilizing voice over IP. But it's how do we harness that and convert that to the workplace in a secure manner, in a practical manner, without interrupting our existing work processes that we have in place. So that when Paul on reception receives a phone call from a customer, he can pass that to Christine in finance or to Janet, the ND, utilizing this new system. So voice over IP isn't just meeting the expectancy. This is about evolution. How can we take VoIP to your mobile and link it in with your desk phone so that actually you're receiving one phone call, you're presenting one number to your end customer so that as the desk phone rings, the mobile phone rings at the same time. That's all utilizing and embracing the likes of voice over IP. Similarly, if Janet wants to inform her whole team about the exciting growth that's coming from her small business. And as an MD, she wants to tell everybody at the same time. She doesn't want to do it. You heard it here first. She can do that on a conference and actually present to a mass audience without having to be limited to it, whoever she calls one by one by one. Similarly, you've got Christine in finance. If she's got to present that prestigious hockey curve of growth and of revenue, she doesn't want to have to send a 50 meg Excel file around to everyone so that they can just see that one piece of information. Having that one click, that ability to just press one button to share her screen so that everybody can see what she sees in an instantaneous communication method is where we really need to take from a legacy and an archaic approach to communication to next generation and a digital generation. So VoiceoverIP is taking that communication from whatever device you're using, albeit a traditional handset, albeit a mobile, a tablet, even your desktop, and converting that voice communication into digitalized format. And instead of going via the existing voice network and the exchanges on your local in your location, if you think about the operators making all the multiple switches and flicking it around from whoever the end recipient is, but obviously in a bit more of a modernized fashion, that's gone now. This is now delivered over the internet, or this is delivered over your virtual private network, so that you can communicate internally and externally in a clear and efficient manner. The major network providers have already seen the benefits of this efficiency, and they're already hanging up on the voice network to make it all IP-based, to make it all digitalized. Like 60% of traffic is already converted to IP at some point. So whenever you have a conversation, 60% of conversations are being converted to IP at some point within that conversation. But we've got to make sure that the core essentials are not compromised. And in fact, we're taking it even further. We're upgrading the voice communication to HD. We're used to HD TV, we're used to HD visual. Let's take it to HD voice, so that you can still speak to your doctors down the road, you can still speak to your suppliers in Staines, or even your auntie in Australia, but it's still crisp and clear. So those levels of expectation, those conversation means are still in place, but you can start to build and reap those extra benefits. Because you can get internal collaboration, you can increase that knowledge share that you have internally. And you can do that whilst potentially reducing spend. So actually, you're not having to always have face-to-face meetings, or you're not having to struggle with being able to communicate individually. What you can do is work as a group and collectively on a project to share that knowledge immediately and instantaneously. Other benefits that come from it are the likes of mobility. Mobile workforces are the norm now. So actually, why is it that we should still have two telephone numbers associated to a user? Why is it that you try their desk phone? If you miss them on the desk phone, you'll then go to the mobile number. No, with VoiceoverIP, you can have a single number each. So I just ring one number, and whether that individual is in the office or on the road, we can communicate them. And they can do that on their smartphone, on their tablet, on their desk phone, on their desktop. It's neutral, it's agnostic, it doesn't matter what end device they want to use. Similarly, that mobility is taken to the next level because you're not tied down by your local exchange. If I'm based out of Manchester, I don't have to have an 0161 number. I could actually be based in Aberdeen and represent myself as a big London corporate with an 0203 number. You can have that flexibility and that mobility. And speaking of flexibility, you can have that what, where, when, whenever it is to suit that individual. The end user doesn't need to know that you're on the road. The end user doesn't need to know that you're not based out of the office. You can have that flexibility to suit your needs at a click of a button. Whether it's on the browser, when it's on the handset itself, you can just control how your calls are displayed and how you present yourself to the outside world. And it's that agility that enables the individuals to develop and transform and take that digitalization step to make sure that their business thrives. And with that comes the cost efficiency. You're not having to fork out high-end CapEx. You're not having to pay for lines and channels that you don't need anymore. This becomes an OpEx model where you spend what you use. And if you have a workforce of 10 employees and you grow it out because your business is thriving from this digital transformation, and you grow to 15, 20, 30 employees, you consume what you need. You take the users and you take the licenses and you take the voice over IP service that you need. And then if you do some level of consolidation and you want to reduce those individuals down, you can just, as a flick of a switch, turn that dial down so you're only utilizing what you need. Here at Virgin Media Business, we have a wide and vast voice over IP portfolio. Our latest offering is that of Cloud Voice, where all of the intelligence, all of the call routing, all of this concept that I talked to you about is held in resilient data centers, and it's held in the cloud. So you needn't worry about the components on site. You needn't worry about what you have to do, and if something goes pop the next day, you having to fork out the money for it, because it's all held in our data centers, and we will take care of that. You simply take a handset that we deliver you that's configured to your name, that's taken to your individual user, plug it in, and within seconds you'll be able to provide and have a clean conversation there and then, all logged in for Paul or Christine or Janet. It's all ready to go for them. Alternatively, they may be stepping away from handsets. They may be embracing the mobile application. They may be embracing tablets application, etc. And they can just take that and download the application, and you're ready to go there and then. It's all configured, set up, ready, as I said, for Paul, for Christine, for Janet, or for whoever you may need it for. But we do appreciate that this is an evolution, not a revolution. So there are those of you who want to keep hold of the equipment that you've had for a while. There are those of you who have already invested in IP handsets, already dabbled in the likes of voice over IP. You might even have a PBX on site, a private branch exchange, which does the configuration for you. It diverts the calls to Janet and Christine automatically. We enable that. We want you to be able to thrive and sweat that asset out, because we appreciate that budgets are tight. So we will have the likes of SIP trunking available for you to serve that need. This all just comes down to what you want to spend your money on, what you want to develop forward. If you want to have that equipment on site and if you want to manage it yourselves, or actually if you want to step away from that restraint and you're willing to give it up and put it into the cloud, we're here to support you and make that as easy as possible. So in terms of the actual connectivity component of that is obviously crucial to it. That voice flexibility is essential to this. We need to make sure that you have enough connectivity and bandwidth underneath the underlying voice over IP, because after all, this is voice over IP. So we want to make sure that you can have the sufficient IP to deliver that. That's why when you need to have the considerations of actually this audio is being delivered over that. How many calls are you having at the same time? What are you already utilizing in your connectivity space? Because we don't want it to be that you can hear clipping, or we don't want it to be a backward step for your business. We don't want to go back to the old days of when Skype and the first times we all experienced Skype and it was jumping in and out. This is a case of utilizing what you already have, having that bandwidth, having the high spend that you may already have on bandwidth or the internet access, and really optimizing that so that you can deliver your voice over it, so that you don't experience any degradation, that you actually are having that HD voice conversation. So it was quite clear that we've already seen individuals understanding or wanting to know more about voice over IP. And hopefully this has given you a quick insight into how useful voice over IP is for your business. We understand from the poll that you can see the merits, but you just need to take it to that next level of understanding, and you'd like to know more. So that's why we've engaged a small enterprise who can give you a real-life example of how that looks. Now, before we go to that, Oliver, I believe we have a third and final poll that we want to present.
That's right. We've got one more poll before we move on, and that poll question is going to appear on your screens in just a moment. very simple question again, and the question is, I'd be interested to know more about VoIP collaboration, yes or no? I'd be interested to know more about VoIP collaboration, yes or no? I'll give you a couple of seconds to vote on that one. Okay, as it's a complicated one, I think all the votes should be in, so any moment now we should be able to see the results. Yes, well, fairly emphatic. 93.5% of people want to know more about VoIP collaboration. Okay, well, as it happens, we have someone, or I have two people who might be able to help you with that. So we can continue. I'm going to hand you back to Tim, and he's going to introduce you to Jim.
Fantastic. Yes, so as Oliver said, we have Jim here today. So Jim works for Synovos and Communications, and he has developed a software-based service that embraces voice over IP. So welcome, Jim.
Hey, how are you doing? Can you hear me all right?
Perfect.
Great.
So Jim, can you tell us a bit about what you guys do?
Yeah, I mean, my background, I was a former mechanical engineer, kind of worked in mining, oil, later in finance, before starting this startup company. And in all of those previous jobs, communicating was always a pain. So, you know, we worked in the field with two-way radios, a lot of indoor, outdoor work, sometimes in the office. But, you know, communicating was always an issue. So that was part of the inspiration for what I'm doing now. And that is basically a voice over IP software product that establishes a new way to communicate. So, you know, right now, like what we use that for is with kind of early adopters, mostly other high-tech companies. You know, we see this being a new mode of communication. It's something that we call spontaneous voice chat, which is basically a much more flexible way of communicating.
Fantastic. And in terms of the software and service that you're offering, how does that utilize voice over IP?
Yeah, I mean, so the way it works is you've got, imagine you've got kind of a contact list and you've got, you know, a Skype-like connection or a voice over IP connection running with every one of those contacts all the time in the background. You're only transmitting data whenever somebody actually speaks. You can very quickly toggle between those people. So it's almost like a really flexible intercom where I can, you know, quickly say, hey, James, or hey, Bob, or hey, Tammy, and you can, you know, very quickly cycle between those people to have sort of instantaneous voice chat. So like a much more flexible walkie-talkie or intercom type system.
Brilliant. So it sounds like you guys have embraced voice over IP quite strongly and actually uses your day in, day out communication method. But do you know of any startup companies who still use the old method of using the landlines? And why is it that you still think they use that technology?
Yeah, I mean, most startup companies right now would use like an instant messaging service as kind of the base for their communications. Slack is a popular one, for example, where it sits somewhere between like email and text messaging, where you've got sort of a list of contacts that you can write to. And you've got these channels organized around topics where, you know, you can share files and links and so forth. So, you know, and it was originally something that you would use strictly within your team, but now you can actually connect it to other businesses as well. And you've got sort of services built into that have like voice over IP calling buttons, or if you want to launch a video call. So most startup companies are already using this, and, you know, you'll still see traditional businesses, large enterprises that use landlines, but, you know, any emerging company or startup, you know, that I work with, you really do not see landlines anymore.
Fantastic. So obviously this is a voice over IP service, and what do you believe happens if the internet connection is poor, if the IP component of that isn't necessarily up to scratch?
Yeah, I mean, it happens, but rarely in the office where you've got a pretty good Wi-Fi connection, and if you've got a good cellular connection where you are, you know, then you won't have problems either. I mean, I think, you know, in many cases, when you're on the move, you know, you may have kind of intermittent cellular connections, or, you know, when you're in your basement, you might not have a great cellular connection, but in that case, Wi-Fi to the rescue. So in my experience, you know, voice over IP is as reliable as, let's say, cellular voice calls. And in many cases now, just as good as fixed lines, and particularly because it's far more flexible. You can take it from anywhere. You can't carry your landline phone around with you. So I really have had a good experience with it, where you might have a couple seconds here and there where the line, as you're switching between Wi-Fi and another cellular network or something, might kind of go choppy for a few seconds, but it, in the grand scheme of things, really doesn't matter because the flexibility far outweighs that.
Of course, and it sounds like you're already truly embracing the mobility components of the voice over IP services. Now, you've already given us an example of what your business does and how it's embracing the voice over IP components of that. But can you take it to the next level? Can you give us a bit more information around what you guys are doing?
Yep. So we're making something that we call spontaneous voice chat. So, imagine it again like this hands-free walkie-talkie that kind of turns your laptop or headphones or really any speaker and microphone combination into a really flexible intercom. So people don't actually need to ring you. So you've got like a white list of people that can talk straight into your headphones or your speaker, and you've got voice commands that allow you to respond directly. So I might be working from home and I might hear, "Hey Jim, you there?" And I'll say, "Respond." Now it opens my microphone to the last person that spoke to me, and we're in this. Now we're in a channel talking to each other. So if literally it will come in, I'll be wearing my headphones, or I'll be walking around. James, who's my business partner, is the most common person to reach out to me. "Hey Jim, respond." "Yeah, what's up?" So you get this really spontaneous style of communication that you get kind of when you're working in the same office as one another, even though you're at home or working from anywhere.
Fantastic. It really does seem like it's true instantaneous communication. But what if they reach you at a bad time, or if you're doing something private that you don't want them to communicate with you with?
Yeah, so that's kind of where the voice commands come in. So like nobody actually, your mic isn't open until you say respond. So if I say respond, now it opens my line to them and they can hear me. And likewise, if I don't want to hear them, if I don't want them to have the ability to just speak out loud through my speakers or through my headphones, because I'm doing something private or otherwise just unavailable and I need to focus, I just say switch off. So I can say switch on, and my contact list can now see that, hey, Jim is available right now, and they can just holler at me. Or I say switch off, and everybody else can see, and there's a little red dot next to my name that closes me off. And now they can still communicate with me asynchronously, so they could leave me a voice message, text message, and they can do all of this hands-free using voice commands, but they don't have that instantaneous connection to me anymore. That's only when I'm switched on.
Fantastic. And how has it worked for you? Why would people talk in this way? Have you seen the benefits from it?
Yeah, I mean, so it really enables a lot more spontaneous collaboration. So much like when you're in the same room, you tend to kind of tap somebody on the shoulder or look across the desk, and you get this really spontaneous, fluid discussion that happens, which is why a lot of people work in the same office. But you lose that, when you work in different offices from home while traveling. So with this style of communication, you get that back. And so what we've seen is that, like, we have much more personal connections with one another. So we hear each other's voices more often. We're texting each other less, and it just feels, a lot more efficient using your voice, and especially when you can do it hands-free when you're walking through the streets or you're driving or something like that, and you're not, you don't have to text each other. Voice just makes a lot more sense.
Of course it does, and it sounds obviously a lot more natural and personal, so overcomes that robotic texting component of that. But you mentioned there that you talk about taking it hands-free, you talk about it going on the road and jumping around. How do you keep the connections alive, in your opinion, and do you not think it would cost a lot of money that way?
So that's the beauty of voice over IP and the internet and some special audio processing that we do. It's really, really flexible. So these connections are basically established, but you're not really transmitting data over them until somebody is actually speaking. So you can now do voice detection on a device. So you're processing the audio from a microphone and you say, hey, is somebody speaking or not? And when you decide that you are, then you start transmitting it to the other end. And only at that point are you really consuming as much data or battery as, say, Skype would. And when you're not talking, basically the line is silent, and you're not really consuming any data.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that works. So I appreciate that you're coming in from Canada at the moment. How wide is your team? How would you describe a typical day for you and your team?
Yeah, so we've got sort of 15 people on the team. 6 of us are in Toronto, 2 in London, 2 in Budapest, 2 in the States, and 2 in Ireland. So we've got some people that work from home, some that work from kind of co-working offices like WeWork. But we all really work from everywhere, and our app makes it a lot easier to do that. So we'll have it installed on our iPhones, on our computers, and we'll leave it on for most of the day, whether we're switched on or switched off. And like I say, I'll be, perhaps sitting at my desk and I'll think of something, some spontaneous thought, and, hey, Balash, are you there? And, he might be making breakfast in the kitchen at the time, and he'll hear me come through the laptop speaker that's on his desk at his house. And he'll say, respond, and it instantly connects us, and he'll say, yeah, I'm here, what's up? And so we'll talk about something, and, it might only take 30 seconds, and then he'll go back to what he was doing, I'll go back to what I was doing. And then, 5 minutes later, I'll hear Daniel's voice come over. Hey, Jim, you got a minute? I need to talk to you about this design. So then we'll talk about that for a couple of minutes. So basically, it feels like we're working around the same table as one another, even though, all 3 of us were in different cities.
No, it makes sense. So just so I'm clear, why don't people just call each other more often then? Yeah,
so I mean, it's potentially annoying to be that person that dials somebody and makes it ring on the other end, and because you've got no idea when the other person is available, right? You're not using any sort of digital signals to say, hey, Jim is available right now. Now is a good time to reach out. So, that person might be in a meeting, or they might just not answer. That's the telephone tag that you were talking about earlier. And so you can use digital signals to get around that. So switch on, switch off is the perfect example, right? If I say switch on, that's conveyed digitally to everybody in my contact list. Hey, Jim is available right now. And if I say, hey, Jim, he's going to be there. And, if you've been inactive, we can actually automatically switch you off. And so your contact list is going to know that, oh, now is not a good time to reach out. It's also very slow to set up a phone call. So because the connections aren't already there running in the background, you click somebody's name, or you dial a phone number, and it kind of takes that 10 seconds before it actually starts ringing on their end, and then it rings, and then, sometimes they answer and sometimes they don't. So that's another problem. It's also not hands-free, right? Anytime you make a call, you have to kind of cut through your lock screen to whatever app you're going to use, or to the dialer, and then you dial somebody's phone. And so it's just not a hands-free thing. It's not something you really want to be doing while you're driving. And it's not instantaneous. I think everybody can appreciate that it's a lot harder to make a phone call than to look across the desk and talk to somebody. And it's the latter that we're trying to enable digitally over distance.
No, certainly. And it sounds like you've already talked about a lot of the benefits, but coming across loud and clear here is that level of efficiency and productivity. Would you say that is the primary benefit, the primary value add of VoiceoverIP? Or are there any other benefits that you would say the core benefit coming from this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly like VoiceoverIP as a whole, efficiency, productivity, cost are all benefits of it. But for us, in the way that we're using our product and the kind of spontaneous voice chat mechanism, it's actually more about, the interpersonal relationships, the closeness of our team, because we're so distributed. Before we used this, we felt much less connected to one another, not joking around as often. You don't hear each other's voices as often. You feel kind of more mechanical in texting one another. So with this, we've certainly got better relationships, and interestingly enough, it's resulted in, when we're doing our personal travel, we purposely try to overlap with one another to go and hang out, and I think everybody's just more familiar with one another as a person, because it's more like we see each other in the office all the time and become friends as a result.
Fantastic. Sounds brilliant. So appreciate that. Hopefully for everyone else, that's given you a bit of an insight in how that actually works in real life scenario, and actually how VoiceoverIP has helped Jim and his team. Oliver, I believe we're now going to hand over to yourself to go through the questions that have been coming through from the audience members.
Yeah, we're going to go through a few questions. Let's start at the top. We're probably going to talk about some of the benefits as we go, drill down into the benefits and talk about some sort of practical examples of how people will be able to use services like this and some of the differences they're going to make. And so I suppose let's start with the simple one first. If we have a question here that's asking, there are only two of us in our office, so how will VoIP work for us? What are the benefits there, really?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So the whole point around voice over IP is that you only pay or you only utilize what you need. So voice over IP can be as flexible for two members all the way up to 2 million members. It really does suit and flex as required. Now, I appreciate that if you only have 2 members, you can want to call internally. That's fine, and actually utilizing the systems of what Jim talked about there sounds like a fantastic software add-on that you could get. But then you still want to be able to make conversations with the outside world. You still want to be able to call your suppliers or your partners or even your customers to be able to contact you. And that's what voice over IP does. It takes all the components of the legacy telephone services and then builds upon it. And you no longer need to buy multiple channels or multiple lines, depending on what you potentially will need, let alone what you actually will need. With voice over IP, you purchase what you want. You purchase exactly the number of licenses and users that you need. So in the scenario where you have two individuals, 2 employees, you purchase those 2 licenses. As you may grow, because your business is thriving, you'll purchase more and more licenses and add them on. Now, obviously, you heard from Jim's team there, and actually Jim's team was circa around 15 people. That would work. Voice over IP works perfectly in that sweet spot, and actually we're looking at the small businesses have really been able to take voice over IP and enhance and utilize it to really suit their end business needs. But the key important message is that flexibility. Whether it's 2 or 2 million, the voice over IP will suit every individual end user.
Super, thank you. Okay, here's another question for you. Does VoIP use a landline-like phone number that you could include on a business card and on your marketing materials? Something that looks more permanent than a mobile, or is it a username? Sort of, what's it going to look like?
Oh, fantastic. No, so it's a brilliant question there. Voice over IP still utilizes the fundamentals of what traditional telephony did. That being, if you had a local number, so say, for example, you're based out of Liverpool, you had an 0151 number, you could still utilize that 0151 number. The same capabilities of porting numbers over from provider to provider is exactly the same with voice over IP. So if you've built up goodwill with your business around a local number, you can still use that. You can still retain that individualism and retain that goodwill that's associated with that number. You don't need to necessarily have the mobile number or the mobile number that, as was said on the question, actually could present yourself as a necessarily unprofessional look and feel. Alternatively, and I mentioned this before, you're not tied down by your local exchange. So as I said, in the scenario of a Liverpool area, you don't have to have an 0151 number. You could present yourself as somewhere from Bristol, present yourself as somewhere from Glasgow, wherever it may be in the geographic region. You can get those numbers to associate to yourselves and present yourself to the end customer or present yourself to the outside world as wherever you want to be from a geographic perspective. But great question.
Super. Jim, jump in on any of these questions as we go through. But I've got another one here. What people are asking particularly about how they're actually going to make this communication. I mean, are they going to sort of exclusively be tied to a tablet or a laptop? And what can they do then with the pre-existing phone networks, handset network in their business? So if they have them distributed, say, in a works yard and in offices, does all that network have to be replaced? Or do you have to go through a computer, or can you have a desk handset?
I'm going to let Jim answer that and see if it works for a real-life example.
Sure. I mean, so we didn't buy a bunch of hardware IP phones. We never had to because we didn't start in that position. I mean, I know at a lot of former jobs that I had, that was the case, right? So you would have a digital IP phone sitting on the desk, and that would tie into a PBX. So I mean that does connect into the voice over IP world. But for us, today, like I've got a cell phone, I've got a phone number. But over the last several years, I've just, gone from, let's say, 50% of my phone calls or of any sort of voice call being between my phone number and somebody else's phone number to, I don't know, maybe 5% now. Pretty much all voice calls that we have now are either on our own system or they're on, something like a Skype or a video call from some other service. So you're not tied to it. You don't have to, but you've got both. I don't think I can think of a single company right now that uses a single calling mechanism and a single app. And a lot of people have that flexibility just because other people use other products, and sometimes you want to, like, let's say you're in an area that has bad Wi-Fi, but you've got good cellular coverage. You might use the phone as a fallback in that case. Or again, if you're in a basement where you don't have any sort of 3G connectivity, then you're going to use Wi-Fi. And so having both and is really valuable. We use our cell phones for pretty much everything now, so no hardware needed. But Tim, I'll let you handle the kind of the hardware side with bigger companies.
Yeah, of course. So there is always going to be the need, or at least for the near future, those individuals who feel comfortable utilizing a traditional handset. So those handsets that they've used for many a year and just utilize and punch in the numbers, and that's how they make a phone call. But it's a case of catering to those as well as those individuals who are more akin to using a smartphone, or actually are utilizing the tablets, or even moving it forward and utilizing their desktop as a single device, and therefore they're utilizing their desktop for their telephony, for their email, for their office work, etc. And that's the whole point about voice over IP. It is just an IP-based service, so it just becomes integrated into your software ecosystem. So if you want it to be integrated with CRM tools such as Salesforce or integrated with your Office 365, you can do that because it just becomes an overlap and integrated system solution. So actually, one of the luxuries you can have is actually if an end customer pops up and you've got information about that end customer, you can just do one click and you can see all that information that you've already got stored based on that number that's coming inbound to yourselves. You're not having to have two disparate systems and being able to cross-check, oh, you are from ABC Limited. Okay, let me just see your details. It's already integrated that way. Alternatively, and as Jim mentioned, if you're on the road and as you're stepping away from your office and going to the road, you don't want to feel like there's any changeover there. You might have to leave the office at 4 o'clock for childcare, but you're on an extremely important call, maybe to internally or even to an end customer. You could do both. You can step out the office, it jumps away from the Wi-Fi into the 4G, and it retains that call. It retains the ability to still speak to end customers. So you'll be driving to pick up your child from the nursery or from school or whatever it may be, yet you're still being able to have that conversation with your end customer. So it just enables you to have that flexibility and mobility to be able to suit whatever lifestyle you need to lead whilst maintaining a professional and work environment.
Okay, super. I just want to ask a couple of questions around this numbers again. I mean, someone has asked about free phone numbers, like an 0800 number. Will you be able to run those through a VoIP system?
So free phone numbers such as 0800 numbers are what we classify as non-geographic numbers, i.e. geographic numbers are the likes of the 0161, 0151, 019, 0203. So non-geographic numbers, exactly the same as you could do on old school telephony systems, you can do on voice over IP. It just, the back-end systems integrate in exactly the same way. So if you already utilize an 0800 number, you can take that forward and keep that and retain that going forward. Similarly, if you haven't got a non-geographic number and want to get a non-geo number, you can do. You just purchase that alongside of the voice over IP service, and they seamlessly integrate. And as they would from old school, they work with new school. So it really is no different to what is available to today.
What about certain flexibility? I mean, you talked about being able to effectively have a London number, but also have your office or your home outside London, so use a London calling number. I mean, do you have flexibility to, I suppose, have more than one number, so multiple appear to be calling from multiple locations? That might be beneficial for some businesses. And also maybe to be able to swap between different numbers rather than using several simultaneously. Is there that flexibility?
So it depends on the VoiceoverIP system that you're using. There are some abilities that you can present yourself to the outside world, one day being the Bristol number, the next day being a Newcastle number. So it really does come down to the individual end components and the end system that you purchase for VoIP. Now, in terms of the actual cloud voice system that we offer at Virgin Media Business, what we promote is the actual having that goodwill and that local number. So therefore, we would be associating a user to a geographic number, and therefore we want you to be presenting yourselves. If you're based out of Bristol or you want to pretend to be based out of Bristol, that's fine. You present yourself as that Bristol number. But if you have multiple sites, some in Bristol, some in Newcastle, some in Manchester, some in Glasgow, you could have all of them under a London number, then provide all of them with a new London number if needed. Or alternatively, if you wanted to retain that local feel, you could have the Newcastle number, the Newcastle office presenting 0191 numbers, having the Manchester office presenting the 0161 numbers. So whatever suits your business needs, there will be the VoIP solution that offers it.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. Jim, I've got a question about, I think more specifically about your system than anything else. They're asking whether or not contact lists themselves can be selective, be smart. So the example is, if you have a business and private contacts, you might only want to be available to one particular group, or you might not want to be available to certain individuals. Members of your family or something like that. Members of your family might be able to made available whilst also being just available to a business group or something like that. Is that flexibility built in?
Yeah, so we've just started building that flexibility in. So you can kind of select certain contacts as colleagues or friends or family, so that I can say switch on to friends or switch on to colleagues, such that if I'm at home and doing something personal, I want to be available to family and friends, and when I'm at work, or even automatically at certain times of day make myself available to say only colleagues and not friends. So we're building that segmentation in now. So per contact, you'll just have settings where you can say, hey, this is a friend, a colleague, or both.
Okay, super. And some people have been asking about the sort of software they need or applications they need. Do they have to download something or put an app on their phone? Does that depend on the kind of system you use and how you want to use it, presumably?
So is that with respect specifically to our system?
Well, I suppose both, more generally and specifically to you as well.
Yeah, I'll let you take the more specific to you, Jim, first, and then I'll jump in about the generalization.
Yeah, I mean, so we've started with an app that you do need to download and create an account for, but where we're going with it is to be able to access, what we call the switchboard network. So today it's the switchboard app, but we're building something called the switchboard network that you'll be able to access from different endpoints. So, we can actually have this communications paradigm be reachable directly from other hardware. So like I say, anywhere with speakers and a microphone, whether that's the dashboard of a car or a smart speaker like, call it the Amazon Echo or the Google Home. And so it's basically all going to be voice driven. And to the extent that you have a switchboard account that you've set up anywhere, just going to our website, then it'll be accessible anywhere. You don't necessarily have to have the app installed on your phone or on anything. You'll just be able to reach it from anywhere. But as it stands today, it's basically an app for your phone or for your laptop, or you can just access it from any website. And that's actually a movement that you're seeing more and more recently. Something called WebRTC enables you to communicate over voice over IP directly within a browser where you don't need to install any sort of plugin. So, I can send you a link via email or as a text, and you'll just click on it and immediately we're talking. And in some cases, those clicks or those links will persist. So you can, perhaps have your own link. In our case, it would be switchboard.com/Jim Rand, and you can always reach me there. And in other cases, it might just be a temporary link that, hey, here's a quick conference call with, a group of parties that we expect to meet once and never again. And then we just destroy that link after, and that's it. So we meet at this temporary location on the internet, which is just a web address, and then immediately you're off. So you wouldn't, in that case, need to install anything.
Sure. Tim?
And from a VoIP perspective, it depends on what kind of device you're using. If you're using a smartphone, then you would be using the likes of an app. So for the likes of Android, Apple, you just simply get the app from the App Store that you're used to getting there. Similarly for tablets. When it comes to desktop clients, if you're utilizing a laptop, then you could there's two variants really. You could do what's known as over the top, so utilizing internet access, and you could use that from a browser-based service. But more commonly, and actually for the better quality, you download the software to your desktop, and that enables you to log in as your respective user and be able to have that kind of all the features and functionality of the voice over IP service on your desktop. Now, for those who want to go a bit more old school and actually still want to use the handset, that's absolutely fine. And actually, we'd utilize an IP phone handset. So there's market leaders available, as well as the likes of Polycom, Yealink, very strong contenders in this space. And depending on the voice over IP service you get, such as the cloud voice from Virgin Media Business, you can purchase the handsets pre-configured. So that means they're pre-configured to the end user. So if that is John Smith, as soon as John Smith plugs the handset in at his desk, it will come up and it'll be personalized to John Smith's details and John Smith's desires of whatever he wants his call forwarding to be, or if he's part of a hunt group, etc. So it depends. So to answer the question around, does it need a software? Does it need an application? It depends on which device you're using. Sometimes it's application, sometimes it's software. In the likes of a handset, that software is already pre-configured. So as soon as you plug it into your router or plug it into your LAN infrastructure, it would auto load those configuration ready to go for the likes of John Smith or whoever the end user may be.
Sure. Just on that point, someone's asked specifically about Virgin. Do they tend to roll out these products? Do they have a suite of products already launched? How far down the road?
Yes, so this is so I speak on behalf of Virgin Media Business. So we're in the B2B space. I don't speak on behalf of our consumer colleagues. But from a Virgin Media Business perspective, we've recently launched our cloud voice offering, and more information is available from our website, which we'll be posting at the end of this webinar. Now, if you want more information, do go to the website. But the cloud voice offering is a end-to-end hosted PBX service. So basically, what that means in practice is we'll be able to provide you with the handsets, with the software, advise you how to get hold of the actual content, be able to associate those users and licenses to an end individual, be able to make the old school phone calls that you used to be able to do that you still can do. You'll be able to integrate it into the CRM tools you have. You'll be able to do call recording. There's a plethora of features and benefits that come with a cloud voice service from Virgin Media Business. So what I'd recommend is if you jump over to the virginmediabusiness.co.uk, have a look at the website, look at the cloud voice offering, and a lot more information will be there. You can then obviously speak to one of our advisors, and they'll be able to give you more information around the product.
Super, thank you very much. We had a question about call centres. The person in question says, I operate a small call centre and voice quality is key. How does VoIP compare with POTS? Presumably POTS is a call centre technology.
POTS is plain old telephony service, so it's a fantastic question actually. So it equal if not better. Now obviously voice quality is a big concern, and as you raised quite significantly there for a call centre, you don't want to be missing out on customer experience, customer care, even a sales conversation. So voice quality is key. And without going into the techie details, with voice over IP, you have new codecs, they're called. So you have these codecs which enable the voice packets to be sent to the end user. It's basically how voice communication happens. It's the digital components of that. And there's the HD codec, which enables the voice over IP quality to be that of high definition. And high definition means that you're not only taking the quality that you are used to with plain old telephony, but actually is enhancing it and taking it to the next level. So I completely understand the concern around actually does voice over IP match or even beat that of plain old telephony, and it is that. It does beat it. It is better quality. Obviously a point of concern, and if it is a concern, is to consider your access. So deliver your IP. This is voice over IP. You've got to make sure that your internet access is sufficient to cater to whatever you're putting over it. So if you are noticing any degradation, the first port of call I would always recommend looking at is your access type. So look at if you're doing a broadband type service, that's obviously contended. So you've got to have concerns about whether you're sharing that bandwidth with your neighbour or the person down the street, etc. That's why when it comes to the likes of voice over IP services, you may want to go to look at a lease line or a managed internet access from Virgin Media Business, because that's when you can allocate and dedicate the bandwidth to the likes of voice over IP to ensure that you don't have any of that voice degradation.
Super. This is probably a question for both Tim and Jim. Jim, probably for you first. I mean, the question is, what are the pitfalls we should be looking for when choosing a system? I suppose, Jim, if I come to you, seeing as you're actually developing a system now, what are the things that you sort of actively avoided to make your system like really useful? I mean, what are the things the criticisms people might have about VoIP, you've taken those on board and sort of negotiated around them as you're developing your system?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first one is, what Tim was just talking about. The internet connectivity is the main issue, but, more specifically, I think in our case, people want things that are really, really easy to use. So to the extent that you can have a system that's really flexible where to communicate with somebody, they don't necessarily have to download an app, that's always really good, right? So if you've got a component where you can just send a web address to somebody, and they can click on it and they can join your conference call without having to download anything, without need to create an account. That for us is a draw, because it actually gets people to download it after. It's like, oh wow, that was so easy, and then they might download our system if they want to be able to create their own sort of web channel where people can reach them. So to me, it's largely about make sure you've got a good internet connection, but make sure that whatever service you're going to use is really easy to use and really easy to invite others to use it with you without requiring anything of them.
Sure. Tim, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so what I would say as well is when people have poor voice quality, it could be down to the likes of the access, as Jim mentioned then, but it also could be down to the headset. So actually what's utilised. So in call centres, you typically have headsets that you plug into the actual phone itself, or you might plug it into your desktop. Now, I really would encourage a good quality headset. Can make a world of difference with the likes of noise exclusion and actually picking up the technology around the headset space is becoming a lot more prevalent now. So when it comes to considerations around the whole voice and communication suite that you're looking at, don't necessarily just look at the VoIP. Look at the access, look at the headsets as well, and look at that wider solution that really is encompassed within that. Now, just as an aside, from an access type, the networks are being developed a lot further. So when we talk about internet access, we're talking about the networks such as the Virgin Media network and the BT OpenReach network, and these are being extended and built upon a lot more. Now, in the future, they're looking at the likes of allocating voice traffic so that you can have that assured quality over even contended service, but that's where the future is leading us towards. Now, I appreciate that there are some areas where that aren't cabled, so obviously Virgin Media have the Lightning program, which means we're extending our reach out a lot further, and then you have the BT OpenReach developments that are looking at the likes of rural areas who are looking to improve the reach of their network and improve the bandwidth speeds available to those rural areas. Now, obviously I can't speak on behalf of BT, but there is an Ofcom regulation for them to deliver to that. Now, that could be a pitfall that holds back an individual or a business if they're unable to have the relevant bandwidth speeds. So what I would say is obviously do check what is available in your area, do check what you're utilising today from an access perspective, because that you do not want to be putting a ton of voice over a service that's already contended and you've got insufficient bandwidth. If and when you speak to the Virgin Media business advisors, they will give you guidance on to what bandwidths are required, and actually if you advise of what you're utilising today, they'll be able to support you and say, you know what, right now there are insufficient areas. Now, I'd expect when you speak to Virgin Media Business, because you're in the cabled areas, you'll be getting the Voom fibre proposition from a broadband perspective. There is a plethora of bandwidth available there, and absolute oodles of bandwidth that you could utilise and deliver cloud voice over. So it really, you appreciate that in the rural areas there are limitations, and obviously that's one that needs to be flagged with as OpenReach grow out wider. But certainly from the Virgin Media perspective of Virgin Media Business locally for me, we'd expect there to be sufficient bandwidth available.
Sure. I mean, one thing we haven't, I'm conscious that we're right at the end of our time, so I'm afraid our answers here are going to have to be quick. We haven't really touched on costs at all, and so I wonder if you could just maybe quickly run me through sort of a cost structure. I mean, how does it work? I mean, today I might well have pay my telephone supplier for a certain level of service, and then anything beyond that service is I have call charge, and then there are bolt-ons as well to that service. Is it going to work in a similar way, or is it simply a subscription with effectively an allotment of data usage? How would it charge for a business, and then how would it charge for individual calls?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're moving away from lines and channels. So in the old school, you're looking at line rental, you're looking at ISDN channels, etc. And it's those channels that you purchase, and you might apply a contention ratio to that. So if you have one channel, you might put 4 telephone lines down it. Cloud Voice or VoiceoverIP looks at the individual end user. You're moving away from collective channels. You're actually looking at how many employees you have, how many endpoints you have. So how many people do you actually want using this service? And you only purchase what you want to be using. So if you're wanting to have 10 employees, you purchase sufficient amount for those 10 employees. You might have a meeting room in there as well. So you're focusing on the end users. And as I mentioned before, as you grow beyond that, you purchase the licenses that suit your business. If you then consolidate and actually you reduce your headcount, you can remove the licenses that you no longer need, and actually you're only utilizing what you need. Now, from an actual usage perspective, many providers, and I'm speaking on behalf of Virgin Media Business, but I'm aware that many other providers also do this, they bundle it up. So actually you're purchasing the license, you're purchasing the handset, and you're purchasing an inclusive call package within that. So actually what you're doing is you're having a nice, neat, managed per user per month spend. So you know that if I've got 5 employees, and let's just say it's £1 just for simple maths, it's £5 every month. As I add an extra 2 users, it then becomes £7 every month. And it's that simple cost management, OPEX-based management, which comes from the likes of VoiceoverIP, as opposed to the old school telephony, which you may have to purchase on-site equipment, and that actually could go pop at any moment. And the last thing you want to do is come into the office and notice that your PBX is down, or actually it's become end of life and the supplier has said that's no longer supported. You then have to go cap in hand and try and fork out the money when budgets are already tight to try and replace that. So that's why we've overcome that problem by putting the call logic and the PBX, that piece of equipment, in the cloud for you. And it's resilient as well, so we don't expect it to ever go down, and actually what we've got is the capabilities to upgrade it and renew it. So you'll always have the latest technology. It won't ever become end of life. We'll always be able to give you provide you the service with the latest equipment, the latest software, the latest components of that, in a simple, manageable, per user, per month price.
Smashing. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. That is it. So I'm going to have to say thank you to everyone. Remember, today's webinar will be available to view in due course, and I'd like to thank our panelists for their excellent presentations and their excellent answers to all your questions. And thank you, the participants. And with that, I wish everyone a good afternoon. Goodbye.